Good morning, everyone. I'm Beth Solwin. I'm the director of the Multisolving Institute. So excited for this webinar today. We're just going to give folks a moment to arrive, and then we'll introduce everyone. And I'm going to share my screen so people arriving know that they're in the right place. And if you're just arriving, welcome. We'll get started in just a minute. Good morning. If you're just arriving, I'm Beth Solwin. I'm the director of the Multisolving Institute. We're really glad that you're here. I'm really excited for this conversation with my friend Nathaniel Smith. And in contrast to some webinars where it's all planned out and I know exactly what's going to happen, this is designed to be a conversation between me and Nathaniel and all of you. So I'm looking forward to it with that kind of sense of curiosity as well. I'm going to start with just some logistics, and we know that people are still arriving, but they will catch up with us. So first, I want to just introduce three of us who are going to be speaking with you today, and we'll have a more proper introduction for Nathaniel in a minute. But I'm Beth Solwin. I'm as I said, the director of the Multisolving Institute. And my colleague, Cassandra Breeze-Ceballos, is on here. She has her camera on for a minute. Do you want to say hello and explain what your role is today?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cassandra Breeze, as Beth said, and I am the engagement coordinator at the Multisolving Institute. So I'll be doing my best to answer questions as they come in and also sharing some resources in the chat today.
Great. And if you email with us or check out our social media, lots of the time you're connecting with Cassandra Breeze. So now you have a face to put with that name. And then Nathaniel, just want to say hello, knowing that we'll introduce you more in just a minute.
Hello.
Great. So here's how we think that the hour is going to go. I'm going to do very, very short introduction to Multisolving and the Multisolving Institute, just so when we use that word, everyone knows what we're talking about. We like as much as possible to have this be a conversation, even though it's Zoom and a webinar and we're not in a room. So we have two short questions for you that will help me and Nathaniel just feel like we know who's here a little bit more. I'll have the pleasure of introducing Nathaniel. Then I have a few jumping off questions for him. And we'll pass that back and forth for most of the time. We'll have two more quick audience polls if you're up for it, and a few minutes toward the end for Q&A from participants. You can use the chat throughout this whole time if you have questions, and Cassandra Breeze and I will have our eye on that and can bring those questions in at the end. So that's how we see this playing out. So what's multisolving? We define that as using one investment of time or effort to solve several problems at once. So an example might be something like turning off a fossil fuel power source, which protects the climate in the long term, but also will help remove air pollution in the short term. And so you're addressing health problems and climate at the same time. And we at the Multisolving Institute are a project just dedicated to encouraging more people, more leaders to take a multi-solving approach, and for those who are multi-solving to make it easier for them to do that. And in case you don't know us and our work, we'll put some links in the chat so you can see our website and sign up for our newsletter, which is the best way to stay connected with us. We think about multi-solving along these dimensions that are shown in this diagram at the left, which we call flower. we think about projects that protect the climate as a key priority of ours, but do so while also creating other benefits like biodiversity, protecting people's health, as in that example I just shared. At the center of the flower, we think about connection, community cohesion, connection of people and nature and people and each other. Jobs and livelihoods. Lots of the solutions to these other challenges turn out to provide ways for communities to build wealth. Resilience to the kinds of shocks that we can't avoid. Ways to get around, ways to have energy, ways to have mobility, and the protection of soils and food and clean water. And now each of these petals, is a great and important benefit in and of itself. But the other thing that's really important, and probably why many of you are here for a webinar about racial equity and racial justice, is each of these benefits can be distributed in different ways. They can go primarily to people who already have a lot of power and control in society. They can go to advance people who've been most marginalized or most disenfranchised from decision making. And that doesn't happen just by accident, sharing these benefits and burdens in equitable ways. And so I'm just excited today to have a chance to learn from Nathaniel and his work and his colleagues, what I think of as some of the cutting edge thinking about advancing racial equity in the context of all of these other issues. So hopefully that's a little bit of orientation to Multisolving and to our institute. And we want to now try get a sense of who's in our virtual room. And so here's the first of the 2 questions that I have for you, which is just why did you attend today? There's so much going on in the world, in your lives. Why dedicate this hour to advancing racial equity? Why is that important to you? And the way we're going to do that, if you come to others of our webinars, you're an old hand at this by now, but we're going to use this software called Poll Everywhere. And Cassandra Breeze will put the link to get there in the chat. I'm going to leave the slides and go here. And when you get to the link, you'll have to first give your name or skip that question. And then you should get a field where you can type just a few words or phrases. And all of us together can kind of see a crowdsourced picture of why is this hour so important. So I'll just give people a minute to find their way. Racial equity is the foundation, someone says. Another lens, so looking for another lens to impact racial equity. No climate action without climate justice, absolutely. Multisolving for racial climate justice action. We can't work together if some groups are marginalized. Some of you are veterans and have been thinking about this for a long time. Everything is inextricably intermingled. Equity means different things to different people. So just getting more perspectives. I agree with that one. There isn't any other way forward. Everything is related. Intrigued by the multi-solving approach, working on equity, diversity, and inclusion at a university, fundamental to survival, planetary health. This is great. Thank you, everyone. It's just a reminder of why we're doing what we're doing here today. It is not prioritized enough in climate solutions. Yeah, exclamation point. Co-benefits are selling points. We can broaden our boundaries is how we think about it in systems thinking. And always interested in this topic. So I bet we could go on and on with this for a long time. Thank you, everybody who's answered. I'm going to go to one more poll question. And this is, you actually should be able to click on this image. So just how well equipped do you feel to advance racial equity and racial justice? Like if you're just beginning this journey, which is totally fine, click over toward the left. If you feel really accomplished, you're further to the right. And just to acknowledge that on everything, we're always learning, moving, and there's a diversity of what we know and where we are. And I really see that, like, I see the spread. And of course, on a topic like this, any moment of the day or from the situation to situation where your little green dot is might shift. But here's our snapshot of the moment. Thanks. We'll just give it a minute for a couple more to land. Thank you, everybody. It just helps give Nathaniel and me both a sense of who we're talking with today. So now is the point where I have the maybe funnest part of this whole conversation, is just to get to introduce and appreciate my friend Nathaniel a little bit. And I'm going to turn off my screen sharing so that you can just, hopefully all can see me and Nathaniel. So I bet many of you have introduced people on a Zoom before, and what you typically do, right, is you write to them or their assistant and you get sent their bio. And that's what happened. And Nathaniel has a great bio that his wonderful assistant, Rhonda, shared. And 3 words in, you can actually tell something about Nathaniel. And one thing I know you'll see today, Nathaniel uses words really carefully, and his words really have thought behind them. So the first sentence of his bio is this: Nathaniel Smith serves as founder and chief equity officer of Partnership for Southern Equity. So that word serves, that's not typical actually in bios that I see, somebody is, or they directs, or they, but that attitude of service is something that stands out as you get to know Nathaniel. I think he serves the organization, and then he serves the communities that the organization serves. And then in fact, the whole first paragraph isn't about Nathaniel's accomplishments. So you have to like go online somewhere besides his official bio, to find out that he has a BA from Morehouse, that he has a master's in urban and policy and management from the New School in New York. You can find out his many, many awards, like he's part of the GRIST 50, 100, I want to get this right, 100 most influential Georgians. But the bio leads with what PSE has accomplished for people. And so that includes things like the first extension of the metro for Atlanta in 45 years. PSE was part of a coalition, I guess a couple years ago now, Nathaniel, that advanced that. That was a $13 million transit referendum that brought public transportation to an underserved community. In the context of COVID-19, PSE was a leader in mobilizing at least $400,000 that got shared to support mutual aid from often really small community-based organizations. And I think we might learn a little bit more about that in this conversation. The other thing you can see if you dig into Nathaniel's qualifications is just how many boards he serves on. Like, I didn't know this, Nathaniel, till I started looking. I would say possibly like 20. And they all are organizations that serve and advance in one way or other the prosperity of everyone via this important project of racial justice and racial equity, which of course is for everybody. We're all going to be better off in a more equitable society. And sometimes, I'm going to stop in a minute or two, Nathaniel.
Oh, no, take your time.
But sometimes, you come across someone who's so accomplished, and you might think they're on all of those boards to have a longer looking resume or something. But in the time that I've known Nathaniel, there was one really pivotal, important board in Atlanta that he resigned from because what I saw, I wasn't privy to it all, but my understanding was his inner compass and his sense of integrity when it came to racial justice and what this organization was able to do just didn't line up. And so that's not what someone does if they're just on all these boards in order to fill out a resume. So just to elevate that sense of service and integrity are two really important things I would name. I think the last thing to say is, I think, Nathaniel, is it right to say you were born in Atlanta? I know
I
you've
am.
lived.
I
Yeah.
am. I am a third generation Atlantan.
Yeah. And so, if there are people, from outside the US, this might not be as clear, although I think it's known everywhere that Atlanta is so important in this country as the home of so much thinking and advancement of the struggle for civil and human rights. And I think that you'll hear that in Nathaniel's stories and thoughts, and that sort of intellectual tradition and practical tradition shows up in his work. And one thing that has been just a delightful surprise to me with Nathaniel and his teachers from that movement and my teachers from the systems thinking field, I feel like a lot of the times our teachers gave us kind of the same marching instructions, Nathaniel, and we've only discovered that in conversation, in collaboration. But it fascinates me. And I also feel like, boy, if those two sets of forces are given the same kind of advice, there's something good, and we should just keep following those marching orders. So I could go on and on, but just thank you, my friend, for coming here and for being the force in the world that you are.
Well, and you ended my bio with the most important aspect of it, and that is that, Beth Samwin is my friend. That is something that I cherish a great deal. So just glad to have an opportunity for us to spend some time together. We don't get to do that as much as we used to. And so, any opportunity that I have to spend good quality time, productive time, positive time with my friend, Beth Samwin, I always make sure that I make the time to do that.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. And thanks to all you online who gave us an excuse to have this conversation. So I'm going to jump in. The way we thought we would structure this is I thought of a few questions. We'll see where it goes. We might ask my first question and improvise from there, or maybe we'll follow the path. But the first one is really just to ask you to share whatever you'd like about Partnership for Southern Equity. Nathaniel, what led you to found it? I think in the US, people know a lot about PSE, but we shouldn't assume everyone here, is familiar.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the need for an organization, and how are you going about filling it?
So, one of the fundamental reasons that kind of inspired me to found PSE was my belief that the lack of a strong and cohesive equity ecosystem in the American South, and to a certain extent beyond, would really truly minimize our ability to realize justice and liberation, right? That we were in a time that spent a lot of time lauding and lifting up individual leaders, but not necessarily taking the time to understand or lift up the value of institution building. And I felt that it was really important, in particular in the South, for us to be more deliberate as it related to us creating and growing institutions that will hopefully be around long after we're here, Beth. And I felt that we the history of the South in many ways and other places have depended so much on charismatic, dynamic, visionary leaders to move the ball, whether it be through their efforts or through their assassinations. That has been the primary cycle by which change has happened in America in particular, but maybe to a certain extent around the world. So I just thought that it was important to be, coming from a civil rights organization, being the child of civil rights movement activists, seeing what happens when organizations aren't supported and built, I wanted to do my part in being a person that was involved in really helping to cultivate the civic and liberation architecture of the South and the nation. I love the South. I'm a Southerner. I also believe that in order for the world to change, the South must change. And and no real work, in my opinion, was being supported in the way that it needed to be by national funders. And the time, in my opinion, was not being invested in seeding that ecosystem. From that need, Partnership with Southern Equity emerged, and now, we're a nonprofit organization that is focused on advancing what we call a new Southern agenda from racial equity and shared prosperity in the South. We also consider ourselves a movement growing organization that is very much committed to not only transforming policies and systems, but also changing people. Because I believe that in order for real change to happen, we can't just focus on changing policies or institutions or systems. We've got to focus on changing people. And that is really been the work of PSC in various ways as a multi-issue organization for now 11 years.
Yeah, wow. Well, my page is already filled with notes of things I want to ask you just about that. But maybe to keep it concrete for another minute, help people see just the trajectory of PSE over these 11 years, like
Oh my goodness.
Growth in size.
Yeah. So when I founded the organization, I was at a university, and I was really compelled by this question around how did I want to show up in the world and serve my community. And from that, and from the support of my leaders at that university, I was able to begin the process of growing this idea. We started out with 1.5 staff, I guess you could say. And now, after 11 years, we have about 50 staff. And that really has exploded in terms of our capacity in the last 2 years. We, as I said before, work in 4 primary areas that are all kind of connected from our perspective. We work in the energy and climate justice space through our Just Energy portfolio, the health equity space through our Just Health portfolio, the economic inclusion and justice space through our Just Opportunity portfolio, and also through the built environment and equitable growth space, which is our Just Growth arm. We also do a lot of work around youth power building through our Yes for Equity work, working to seed the next generation of leaders, and also adult allies who are working with young people to advance racial equity. And we also have another initiative, an effort called Just Solutions, which is our social enterprise arm that works with governments, nonprofits, and foundations and other institutions that are working to find their way and purpose in the racial equity movement.
Yeah, so I'd like to thank you for sharing that. And I'd love to just even tease that out for us a little bit more, like portfolios. That's not necessarily an idea that you hear all the time. And then you talk about circles. And you started, I think almost your first sentence was about building an ecosystem. And I know that's like key to your thinking. So circles, portfolios, ecosystems, those all sound like circles. Like, why do you think in circles, Nathaniel?
Well, number one, no organization can do it alone. And from our perspective, a lot of the work is centered in disruption, right? Disrupting systems and values that continue to perpetuate injustice, in particular for Black communities and historically disinvested communities of color. And in order to change those outcomes or those results, we believe that you have to fundamentally disrupt the systems and ecosystems that continuously perpetuate those injustices. So PSC was created to disrupt, and it's a disruptive organization, but it's also a connector and a bridge building organization. You talked a little bit about our equity circles, Beth. We have in each of the areas that we work in, what we call equity circles, which are really connecting points for various organizations representing various sectors through shared values, are working to advance outcomes that are related to this commitment to disrupting inequitable systems and even more so changing policies and people. The ecosystem approach for us, again, is really critical because, we believe deeply in Dr. King's idea of what he called the network of mutuality, that we live in this network of mutuality and that we're bound by this single garment of destiny. What affects one directly affects us all indirectly. And if you believe that, then you also have to believe that you have to take that approach in order to replace and transform the negative network of mutuality, so to speak, of systems that continue to perpetuate the injustices that are affecting Black people and historically disinvested communities of color. So it's not just about the process of weaving together, right, these ecosystems, but actually transforming the relationships within that ecosystem between people that are engaged in that ecosystem. So one of the things that, I talk about a great deal is the work around what we call relationship acceleration, right? How, the equity circles that we create are places to realize what we call relationship acceleration. Why are relationships important? Because change moves at the speed of trust. Right. And so for us, we're creating real places where relationships can be accelerated in a way where people will leverage their trust muscle, build their trust muscle in a way that would also help them to grow their civic muscle in ways that will perpetuate the type of outcomes that we're trying to realize at the Partnership for Southern Equity with our various partners.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. And maybe just to pull out a couple commonalities, since I know a lot of folks are coming from the systems field to this conversation. So of course, that Dr. King quote speaks to the heart of systems thinkers for sure. And I think it's really interesting in Multisolving, we talk about building or growing new connections between the parts of systems. We say Multisolving is limited because we've got all these silos, whether they're jurisdictions or different budgetary categories. We can't find the win-wins because our systems are fractionated. And so what I see in PSE's circles, and when you talk about relationship accelerators, I see a strategy that's about rewiring systems so they're connected in different ways. And in systems theory, one of the tenets of systems theory is that the connections in systems give rise to their behaviors, and that if you want to see a different behavior, you have to change the connections. And so one of the things that has just inspired me about PSE's strategy is it's deliberately rewiring systems. Yet I also think you're saying that alone is not enough or not fast enough, which is when you talk about disrupting systems. You're not just content to connect people so they know people they didn't know before. So if you could talk about both disrupting systems and also maybe challenging underlying values, because I think you're doing more than just connecting people who haven't been connected before.
Boy, I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better question, and I think that is one of the challenges a lot of times with systems thinking is that people believe that just by tinkering with the system, that outcomes will be realized that are consistent with what they want to see. But we have to go further than that and understand that there are shared values, right, that undergird the systems that continue to perpetuate injustice. So even though, for example, in the South and in particular in Georgia, one of the approaches that was utilized to minimize comprehensive change was the citification movement, which created various cities now in our state and in other places, and also the many, many counties that we have, right, which was created in a way to maintain a perspective around home rule and minimize a more sweeping approach to policy change in ways that will encourage inclusion and justice. While these various counties and cities are segmented, they still share, the leaders in those communities still share a common set of values, right? And so without focusing on disrupting and really changing the values that undergird the systems that are constantly perpetuated through the public policies that reinforce those systems, then we're not really getting to the type of change that we want to see. That is why, again, I have to go back to my ancestors, Dr. King, when he talks about the need for a values revolution, right? Which is another key part of PSC's work. It's not just about, creating and disrupting systems. It's also about creating a values revolution that will influence the way that systems are designed. Why is that important? Because at the end of the day, the policies that shape those systems are a reflection of the values of people in power. So we must work to transform either their values or replace them with us, our communities and leaders that we know are consistent and congruent with how we see the world in those places of decision making that will then realize not only new systems and new policies, but all of that will be undergirded by a new set of values that are consistent with what we believe in and what we're willing to fight for.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And of course, that's another parallel with the systems thinking world, where for folks who are familiar with that, we talk about the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is events, and beneath the events is structures, and beneath that is mindsets, worldviews, and values. So I think those parts are very familiar to people who think in terms of systems, both rewiring and spurring this examination of values. The third part I'd love you to talk a little more about is disruption. So we talked a couple of days ago, and you gave as an example the Metro Equity Atlas as a tool, I think you said, to disruption. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe explain how you think about that. Well, maybe what the Atlas is, first of all, so people know.
Yeah. And there are a couple of, I think, two real hard examples of ways and the work that needs to be done to disrupt the systems that continue to perpetuate. One of the real issues that I have seen in this work, in particular around systems transformation work, is that a lot of times the shapers of the system, in particular policymakers and other key civic leaders, make decisions that reinforce bad systems most of the time because they have bad information or bad data or old data or they're uninformed, or because of the lack of data, they're using their values and in particular their own myths and also beliefs to drive whatever they believe good policy should be. And so one of the things that I talk about a lot with my friends that are doing this work is what I call the battle of the baseline, right? Working to ensure that a baseline understanding of the nature of the problem is more consistent with our values and also the challenges that people are facing every day in the communities that we serve. And so as a result of that, I made a decision many years ago to create something called the Metro Atlanta Equity Atlas, which was at the time a more, static geospatial tool that was leveraged to create a deeper conversation about where we were as a region in metropolitan Atlanta as related to equity. That was almost 7 years ago. And it really played a role in redefining what the baseline was and what the real nature of the problem was, which again, disrupted the way that policymaking was made, which in turn disrupted the system in terms of what those solutions were that were embedded in the system or challenges. And so now we're back again where we're reconstituting the Metro Atlanta Equity Atlas, which was Maya, into now Maria, the Metro Atlanta Racial Equity Atlas. And the exciting thing about this atlas is that it will be led by storytelling. And so as opposed to using primarily geospatial data to articulate the issues associated with racial inequity in Metro Atlanta, we're actually leading with the real people that are experiencing structural injustice and allowing the data to reinforce their stories. And so we're really, really excited about it. So for us, there are two things. We see Maria not only as another part of ensuring that the baseline is positioned in a way, a baseline understanding of the challenges that we're facing are positioned in a way for people to truly understand what everyday people are going through. But we'll also look at it as a way to grow our movement of individuals who not only will learn about the challenges, but also be connected to the organizations that are doing the work on the ground to alleviate these challenges, right? So we're really excited about Maria, and we really, again, look at it as a movement growing tool, a baseline defining tool. And as you said before, when you democratize data, Beth, it naturally is a disruptive opportunity because, in our organizing learning, we learned that, that as an organizer, that there are three types of power, organized money, organized data, and organized people, right? And so we want to organize data and give it away, to people so they can become disruptors themselves. And then the second thing, which I know we'll talk about, which I think also has great potential to be a disruptive force, is the work that we're doing around the Justice for the Accelerator. And we can talk about that too. I don't want to monopolize this part of the conversation, but that is another example of us trying to work to disrupt the history really of racial injustice, of white oppression in our nation.
Yeah. I want to make sure that we get to talk about that work because I think it's so important. We've had this whole conversation and talked about racial equity, and I haven't really given you a chance to give your definition of it. Is there anything you would want to say just about how you see, measure, recognize racial equity? You think it's...
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that is important before I provide my definition of racial equity is to assert that race in itself is a political and cultural construct that is not real, right? That whiteness, blackness, and all these things biologically, there are minimal differences between our communities, right? And so race in many ways has been shaped to be a political and social construct that has continuously played a part in reinforcing this hierarchy of what values, right? And value that has been placed on the color of someone's skin. And so in that hierarchy of value, of course, you have whiteness at the top and other colors at the bottom. And I would submit to you that the further from you are from the spectrum, the less valued you are from the people who are in positions of influence and power. So when we talk about the work of racial equity, of course, not only are we talking about disrupting that hierarchy of value and create an environment where everyone is valued, everybody is loved, and everybody is seen as a critical part of our human and ecological family, right?
Right.
But that also we're creating an environment where that person's skin color does not have more influence on their life outcomes than the dreams and hopes that they have in their hearts, right? That we're trying to create a world where skin color does not become a predictor of your life outcomes. And that's basically what the work of racial equity is about.
Right. Yeah, sometimes when we're trying to explain multi-solving and the worldview underneath it, we talk about two worldviews that are in tension or in battle in the world today. And one of them we say is organized like a pyramid with white men at the top and white women underneath that, and the earth and its other beings way down somewhere at the bottom. And the other worldview being this web of interrelationship or inescapable network of mutuality, where each part is precious and free and doesn't have any power based on any of those attributes, or race or gender or country, global south versus global north. And we talk sometimes about multi-solving being sometimes people's maybe an uncommon experience of living in a system that's organized as a network and a web, as opposed to a pyramid like that. And I wonder if you would agree that when you're talking about portfolios and circles, I feel like sometimes I've observed that operation, that you're inviting someone who might most of the time, work in these systems that still are organized, whether it's with structural racism or patriarchy or any of these problematic power over systems. But then the people are getting something done together as a network. It's the just growth circle, and they're changing a policy. And, when I've collaborated in some of these circles, I've noticed, like the white leader of a national organization might be actually sitting down and learning from a grandmother from the neighborhood who somehow in that circle has the knowledge about where the water runs in that neighborhood. But you and I have never really talked about that, whether that's an accident or part of your design, creating these experiences of a different way of relating. What would you say to all that?
Yeah, well, I think it's, one of the fundamental premises really of our value-based organizing work, really, which is a belief in moving people together based on their higher purpose versus their animalistic concerns and needs, right? Organizing around love versus fear. And I think that, a lot of times that is the other key component of the work that must be done. I think a lot of times, even within the context of our progressive community, we try our best to organize communities around their immediate needs or their fears or their concerns. And that, to me, is not a long-term option in order to keep people together for the marathon that we have to run towards justice and liberation, right? We have to constantly try to push people towards their higher selves, right? To their higher levels of humanity. And our belief is that through this ecosystem cultivation and growing work, through our equity circles, that we're creating an opportunity for people to be connected in ways that will compel them to reach towards their higher selves, not their lower selves. And when you're able to do that, people are more willing to sacrifice, because again, the work of racial equity, and I appreciate you talking about this indirectly, Beth. It is not, the work of equity and racial equity is not really about what you're willing to give to make racial equity real. It's about what you're willing to give up. Right. And so our hope is through our equity circles, we're creating a space that will make it easier for people to give up what they need in order to realize liberation and racial equity.
And that might be resources, right? It might
privilege,
be access to relationships.
Yeah, privilege, a perception about a certain community, that has been kind of drilled in their head through media and other different things, through family. And so it's creating these safe environments, but courageous environments at the same time. I remember the conversation that we had after, it's unfortunate, another police officer murder and death that occurred. And it was the day before our Just Growth Circle meeting. You remember that, Beth?
I do.
And we had, and at the time, and it's so funny how the demographics have shifted in the Just Growth Circle, but at the time, the majority of the members of the Just Growth Circle were majority white, big green leaders. And Beth, as well as my white staffers, led a conversation with these leaders in the Just Growth Circle about what they were willing to give up in order to advance racial equity. And it was one of the most powerful things that I had a chance to experience, because a lot of times when we have these conversations, it's only Black people that are having the conversation. Like when it's a planned conversation, unfortunately, white people usually don't show up to those conversations. But to have an opportunity to be privy to a conversation like that in a room full of influential white environmental people who are trying to figure it out, was really a powerful thing to experience. And it's one of the things that I won't forget. And also, I think it helped me again to even have more faith in my theories and the work around PSC and in particular our value-based organizing work.
Yeah, and another thing that I learned, and I think we discovered after that, like that was a pivotal conversation for, I think, most people in the room. And in some of the evaluation that we did, even though it was uncomfortable for the white people in the room, it was also incredibly meaningful and a way to tap into their own courage. And as you said, some of those people went on to take risks and stand up and open conversations or get a training in racial equity for their board, or like all sorts of things emerged from that moment of kind of vulnerability of many people.
I mean, I think that work played a big role in, and I don't know if your support has access to the piece that we wrote for Nonprofit Quarterly around the Just Growth Circle, but I think that'll be a good, and I think we may have sent that to him earlier, but a good way to kind of learn about one of the circles. But one of the exciting things is, I think that conversation, Beth, played a key role in, for example, the leadership at the time that were representing the city's watershed management department, right? Being courageous enough to go back to the watershed, her job at the watershed management department, and to see herself as more than a cog in the machine, but an agent for justice, right? And then what happens? We create the Water Equity Task Force, right, with watershed management. We move forward to begin the process of creating this equity playbook. And then now we're still fighting to realize the green infrastructure bond, right, at the city of Atlanta. So again, you know, change happens through relationships, in my opinion. And I think that unfortunately is a lot of what we're missing in the movement work that we're trying to do as a community, even the systems work. I mean, we talk about the relationships of this and how they influence certain outcomes, but we forget, though, that again, that all of that, in my opinion, is undergirded by a set of values and assumptions that we must begin to move and change.
And just quickly, Beth, sorry, I wanted to give you a quick time check that it is 11 or 12:48. So, you know, if you wanted to make time for questions and answers or keep going, I just wanted to bring your attention to the time.
Oh, you don't want Nathaniel and me to talk for another hour? We're just getting going.
We can do that.
Thanks, Cassandra Breeze. Yeah, well, maybe to pin that last bit by just saying, I hope that some themes are coming clear for people about this way of working doesn't, to me, seem to be just one thing, right? It is holding people and allowing relationships to grow. But it is also creating some kind of tension or disruption, right? So whether that's, here's the data on how far we are from actual equity, or whether it's changing your agenda, which was supposed to talk about water policy, and instead you say another tragedy, another violence happened in our country last night. We're not going to talk about water policy. We're going to talk about police violence. There's that tension, right, of disruption, and then some kind of a safe space for risk-taking and relationship development. And beneath it all, and I think what people show up for and what people are attracted to PSE for is that conversation about values, which in a lot of places in our country is missing. So I guess I would offer that up as my summary of key elements, and maybe ask if you think I missed anything in that, Nathaniel.
Well, I also think that the greatest connector of any community, in my opinion, is love, right? And I think that it's important to really lift up the transformational power of love. You know, that to me is the greatest disruptor of systems and the greatest architect of systems and environments that can create outcomes that not only see everyone as precious, but also work to create those systems and decisions that will help to realize that through policy making. And so, you know, I think that people in such uncertain times, you know, and in times of fear, we tend to run away from the power of love, and that is what our opposition would like us to do. They would like us to run from that, because that is the most powerful force that we have on our side. And so I would honestly say, and this is just my belief, one of the main reasons why I think that people engage with PSC is I think they really truly believe that we love them, and that we are trying to create an environment where everybody is loved and everybody is valued, and our planet is valued, and our children are valued, that our elders are valued, that all people are valued. And that if we believe that together, then our system should represent that and not the other way around.
Right.
And so for me, that's why I think we've been so successful.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And from what I see, I think that is the thing that makes PSC special. One of the things, and why I was so glad to be able to share some of your thoughts with our multi-solving community. So I do want to be respectful of the time. And I would love you to just say a couple words about Justice 40 and the Accelerator. And then maybe
what I will say is just go to justice40accelerator.org. I want to give people a chance to ask any questions they may have. We're doing some really exciting work around President Biden's Justice 40 executive order, supporting organizations led by people of color around the country to be competitive around this opportunity, but also use the Justice 40 opportunity as an opportunity to advance a repair and healing agenda around climate and land use decision making around the country through the Justice 40 dollars. So we'd definitely encourage you all to check out our website. Shout out, of course, to Groundswell, Elevate Energy, the Solutions Project, and Hummingbird, who have been core partners, but also all of the other the 52 members of our cohort that we're supporting, and the new cohort that'll be coming on. But definitely would encourage you all to check out justice40accelerator.org to find out more.
Yeah, and so Nathaniel, Cassandra Breeze is putting lots of these links in the chat, so people have a lot of that. All right, well, let's open it up for questions. Cassandra, any have emerged that you would have Nathaniel take?
There actually haven't been any questions submitted. I think people have just been very riveted by your conversation, and I'm wondering too if it might not be good to just spend the rest of the time talking, and folks can send questions to info@multisolving.org, because folks seem hungry to continue to hear y'all discuss. As of now, there's not been any questions submitted.
Yeah, and please, if folks have any questions, there's no such thing as a crazy question. Feel free to ask. We're here to. Oh, that's a great question. Well, could you talk a bit about the role of youth in this movement? Well, you can't have a movement without young people. I mean, it's that simple. I started out as an 8-year-old doing this work, actually working at being at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference at the time of the divestment movement. And at the time, the leader of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Joseph Eccles Lowry, was actively involved in the divestment movement. And I was holding up signs before I even could read what the signs said, being really intentional about making sure that young people, whether it be, and in particular in my experience in the civil rights, being a child of a civil rights activist, whether it be Birmingham or Montgomery or Albany or other places around the South, young people played such a critical role in breaking the backs of white oppression. That we have to be intentional about ensuring that they're engaging in the work in a way that not only will make them more successful, but continue to position them to feed the movement, right? And I think that unfortunately, because we haven't been intentional about engaging young people and really cultivating their agency for leadership in this moment, there are many young people that assume that the top of the mountain in terms of being a leader for justice is being invited to be on a talk show or news TV, to be on MSNBC or CNN and to be a talking head. When the real work, it requires a lot more than a tweet or an Instagram post or even a conversation on Clubhouse. We've got to, focus and make sure that they understand from our ancestors about the power of grassroots organizing. How do you leverage a march and a press conference and not see that as the end, but a means to an end? These are things that we have to pass on. We have to pass on to our young people the language of liberation, right? That there is, Beth talked about my deep commitment to using words that actually mean something, right? And our liberatory, we have to teach and support our young people in understanding that. So they are very, very important. And that's the reason why a year ago, we acquired a national organization called Yes out of Durham. And now we have an effort called Yes for Equity that is being very intentional. We actually just hired 10 youth organizers, 5 in Durham and 5 in Atlanta, to engage in PSC's work, not as the kids' table at Thanksgiving, but to actually be organizers and a part of the work that we're doing. So we're really excited about that.
Would you say a few words about the different academies that I know are kind of core to PSC's strategy too?
Yep, and leadership development is another central part of PSC's work. I know I didn't go down into like talking about the specific tactics that we use, but there are tactics behind the work that we're doing, and one is around leadership development. We have we've had many leadership development over the years. Our most recent cadre of a group of leadership programs is, of course, our Just Energy Academy, which is our oldest leadership academy. Well, not our oldest, our second oldest, which focuses on supporting and realizing the next generation of racial equity leaders who are engaged in energy and climate issues. We also have, which is coming down the pipe line this year, our Just Health Academy, which will again hope to develop the next generation of racial equity leaders that are advancing more healthy environments for their communities. We also have a leadership program called Development Watch. A lot of the work that we're doing is around this work that we call democratizing development, where we're trying to disrupt the way that public finance is used to advance gentrification in communities. But we also understood that the people have to be involved in that process. So we have a Development Watch Academy where we're actually training community residents to be not watchers of crime, but watchers of growth and development and public finance in their communities. So we're really excited about that. We just graduated our first class of 15. We also have resident leaders for equity, and also, of course, our value-based organizing training for values to victory. So, we do a great deal of training for our community, and it's all free. I think that's the other important thing that lift up Beth is that it's free, because we want to be as supportive as we can of the community.
Yeah, thank you. I see another question about, if you're up for one more, Nathaniel, how does your work intersect with electoral or voting rights initiatives?
Well, I mean, equity can't live without a strong democracy. And so, we have tried our best to support the organizations that are doing the electoral work, But as a movement building organization, we also see elections as moments in time, and that the real work has to be a 24/7, 365 obligation. And I think a lot of times, unfortunately, we focus so much on elections that we've created this kind of how can I say this, transactional relationship between the elected official and the campaigner and the community. And so one of the things that we initiated was something called Vote for Equity. Of course, we're a nonprofit organization and we can't support elected officials. But we have tried to lift up that if a candidate is committed to equity, then you should support them. So we've tried to be really intentional about that. And, again, while we believe that it's important to get involved and that democracy is critical and we've done voter education work, our focus is really on the marathon and really on, giving the community something to fight for every day, which hopefully then would lead to their passion on election day to go out and vote.
Well, maybe that lets me squeeze in one last question I didn't get to because it builds off of that. Nathaniel, you and I met when President Obama was in office. And then your work, everyone's work shifted with the Trump administration. Now we have the Biden administration and some opportunities. We throw a pandemic in the mix. And one of the other things that so impresses me about PSE is just the nimbleness. You move forward no matter through all of those, right? Into the opportunities, against the threats, creating mutual aid when it's needed. Where do you think that ability comes from in your organization?
I think it comes back to, number one, just a deep commitment to showing up, in the way that we need to show up for our people, right? And to have a deep commitment to serving the people. People always talk about saving communities, but if you want to save the community, you got to be willing to serve the community. And I think that is a key tenet of PSE's work, is that we're willing to show up and also disrupt in a way that we can. I mean, the COVID-19 fund is a prime example of that. We knew that a lot of the dollars would be going towards the traditional bigger organizations. And so we stood in the gaps and raised, I think it was even close to 600,000, Beth, wow, to give the frontline organizations that were not seen by the civic establishment, who are actually on the ground working in community. So for us, again, it's about really leading with love and really trying to just show up. And thank goodness we have the capacity, and my staff allows me to have all of these big ideas, and they don't complain, and they just show up, and because as you know, I have a lot of crazy ideas. And sometimes it's difficult to work for me because I have so many, but so far so good,
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think it's come through for this whole hour how much your work inspires me and how much I've learned from it. And I really hope this hour has given other people a glimpse into it. We'll follow up with an email with lots of the same links in the chat so you all can connect with PSE, definitely get their newsletter, all that good stuff. And the last thing I wanted to say, I'm going to share my screen for 1 second. And thank Nathaniel in the chat.
Thank you, everybody.
It's definitely coming in, Nathaniel. So this is the first of what we see as a kind of ongoing series of conversations with leaders who have a perspective on multi-solving. And I'm really excited to say in July, Catherine Wilkinson, who many of you might know is one of the co-editors of that book, All We Can Save, which is a collection of writings by women on climate change, will talk with us about this other key multi-solving opportunity of advancing gender equity and climate at the same time. We don't have a Zoom registration page for that yet, but we'll announce it on our newsletter. So make sure you're signed up for the Multisolving Institute newsletter if that seems like a conversation you'd like to hear about. As with everything, this is an experiment too. So let us know, did you like this? Would you rather have just had Nathaniel give a talk without my questions from every direction, or did you like the interplay? Let us know. And thanks again, Nathaniel.
Uh, take care. Have a great
All
week,
right.
everybody. Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.